Well, my friends are out there protesting, and I support them in the protest. But the fact of the matter is, the main thrust of the protest is very limited. It's for rights of Israeli Jews inside Israel. Very little concern for the uh, crushing of Palestinians right next door. A little, you see, bits and pieces, but not a great deal. In fact, some of the heroes of the protest movement are some of the worst criminals, like Defense Minister Yoav Gallant or Benny Gantz. They're considered heroes of the protesters. You take a look at their record in Gaza, they should be facing the International Criminal Court. Vicious, brutal record. Unfortunately, these issues are much too dissociated. Not all. There are some among the protesters who are bringing them up. Take even the Supreme Court. Now defending the Supreme Court has become the top issue for the protesters, and they're right. If the Supreme Court is gone, it'll be a much worse country, much more reactionary, much more brutal. On the other hand, the Supreme Court has a terrible record in the occupied areas. It'll occasionally delay an illegal settlement for a couple of months, then allow it through a backhanded way. It doesn't even recognize that it's an occupation. There's a lot of problems. In fact, if you may remember, I don't know if you've seen it, a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, roughly, Israel's major legal correspondent, Moshe Negbi, his name is, wrote a book called Kistom Hayinu. We were like Sodom. We were major criminals. It's all about legal and other corruption inside Israel. Does talk about the terrible record in the occupied territories, but there are real problems. So, yes, I think the protesters can maybe help fend off the worst, but it's not a protest that's going to the heart of the issues. I should also say something else. The popular support for the government is mostly what are called Mizrahi Jews, Arab Jews, Jews from the Arab countries. They've been very badly treated throughout the history of Israel. I've seen it myself. I could tell you stories about it. Israel for a long time was run by an Ashkenazi elite, people like us, educated, professional, secular, maybe left, center left, but harshly repressing the Jewish population, the Arab population of Arab origin, and they bitterly resented it. A lot of them are very religious, not all. There are groups like the Black Panthers that emerged about 40 years ago, I guess, trying to support the rights of Moroccan Jews and other protesters. That's a lot of support for Menachem Begin, oddly considering what he was. But those are factors we have to consider too. Well, if blacks in the United States were excluded from roughly 90% of the territory by a variety of laws and administrative procedures, I would call it white supremacy. That's the way Israel has been since its origins. That's only one aspect. If there were large-scale funding in the United States for white settlements, development of white areas, but nothing for black settlements and black areas, I'd call it white supremacy. It's not the case that within Israel's own boundaries, it's not the case that Jewish Israelis, Jews and Palestinians are treated equally. And in fact, as you know, you can't even have Israeli citizenship. There's no such thing as the High Court determined. You have to be Jewish or Palestinian, and if you're Palestinian, you're deprived of many rights in all sorts of ways. That's a form of Jewish supremacy. just as it would be white supremacy in the United States. In Gaza, it's just a monstrosity. Israel has destroyed Gaza. It barely survives. It's living under inconceivable conditions. It's literally almost unlivable. The West Bank, Palestinians are subjected to incredible interference and restrictions on their lives. That's Jewish supremacy. And the whole region is integrated. As in the last 50 years, since immediately after the 67 war, Israel has been moving to develop greater Israel step by step, which incorporates whatever in the West Bank Israel wants to have within itself. New cities, Ma'ale Adumim, Ariel, Kedumim, others linked to Israel by major infrastructure projects, subsidized housing for Jews in the West Bank. You can live in a Jewish settlement in the West Bank and not even know there's any Arabs. You can take a superhighway to your job in Tel Aviv. If you're a Palestinian, you may be barred from your olive groves, your fields by checkpoints, which are arbitrarily opened and manned. Probably about 150 or 160 of them by now. Call it whatever name you like, but certainly Jewish supremacy is about the weakest term you can use for it. So I don't see anything wrong with the term, but it's not much point debating terminology. It's the situation that exists that we have to face and be interested in doing something about it. It's an intolerable situation, certainly for Palestinians. It's very harmful for Jews. It was predictable and predicted in the 1970s that if Israel continued its policies of sacrificing security for expansion, that it would lead to moral degeneration within Israel, undermining of the status of the Jewish institutions, would turn Israel from a very admired state, as it was in the 70s, to a pariah state, as it is today. Predicted, predictable, all of these things have happened. For the Palestinians, it's been a terrible period, getting worse. So whatever name we like to give it, that's the situation. And we should be dedicated to overcoming.